Hi, I'm Abby. I have a lot of records, and this is Vinyl Monday. So welcome back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Vinyl Monday is the series where once a week I sit down and just talk about albums that I love. Or, sorry, I talk about albums that I love with no first-hand information, no gravitas, just hubris. Silly me, how could I miss that? Well, if 20-minute deep dives with just hubris aren't really your thing, don't worry, I also do Vinyl Monday in 60 seconds, both here on my channel as well as over on my Instagram. So for the past couple weeks, Sagittarius season has been in full swing. I, for one, am harnessing the chaos that I already possess as a Gemini woman in tenfold. From designing a full-page advertisement for a local publication, taking a swing at a department store, and putting your record label's logo on it, to lighting a guitar on fire. From any number of things Keith Richards has done, to biting the head off a bat, it is the time of the year to celebrate all of rock and roll's most out-of-pocket men. And judging by the sheer number of my favorites born between November 21st and December 20th, I just can't quit them. I will forever be chasing after you with the fire extinguisher and the tetanus shot. Sagittarius men, I love you all. So I'm covering this week's album to celebrate the belated birthday of maybe the most unhinged Sagittarius man in rock and roll. This week I am covering Master of Reality by Black Sabbath. Remember, if you want a hint as to what next week's episode is gonna be, all you have to do is check out my community tab. I post lots of fun little things over there. Sometimes I host polls to pick future episodes, and I keep a running count of how many episodes I can make it without swearing 5 times in one episode, thus completing the opening chord progression of the Beach Boys' Our Prayer. Yes, I said Our Prayer this week instead of Our Swear. So, before I get into the nitty-gritty of one of the most iconic heavy metal records ever made, full disclosure, this is far out of my comfort zone and out of the realm of what I usually cover on Vinyl Monday. This is not territory I usually foray into. Considering how important Sabbath is to rock and roll in the 70s, it does deserve the spotlight, and that's why I'm covering it on Vinyl Monday. The metal family tree is unfathomably large and endlessly fascinating. Black Sabbath really only is a drop in the bucket. This video will in no way be a comprehensive history of Black Sabbath or a full history on heavy metal. There are other YouTube channels that do that way better than me. But to loop this album into the rest of my content, I will be making some relevant observations. I'll just say that while Master of Reality seems like a whack choice for me, you'll find it's not too far off. I'm also covering Black Sabbath because I will take literally any opportunity to dress like a Victorian orphan child. This dress just doesn't get enough love. Alright, so let's take the plastic off. So it's pretty obvious that my copy is a repress as well as a US copy. It sports these white Warner Brothers labels and not the green labels, or the iconic Vertigo swirl. I also really like the Vertigo spaceship label, super underrated in my opinion. Poetry on Plastic just posted his UK Sabbath collection, and oh my god, it's beautiful. We are not worthy. As so often happens when you buy 90% of your albums used, I do have some packaging missing, but I'll be showing you what I don't have in supplementary photos. Let's talk about this album art. This design was by Mike Stanford, and on the OG copies, instead of opening from the side like mine does, they open from the top like an envelope. You'll see text that says open here. Mine doesn't have this. But my copy is modeled after the original in the sense that we have purple text up top and embossed lettering on the bottom. The embossed text was first replaced with gray. On the streaming services, you'll see magenta text over green text. There is literally every variation of this album art that you can imagine. My personal favorites are the primary color lettering from Brazil and the Christmas color scheme. I just think it's goofy. On the back, we have all of our lyrics, and on the inside, there's supposed to be a poster. Mine clearly doesn't have this anymore. And that photography was done by Keith. No, not that Keith. The other Keith, Keith McMillan. He also photographed the cover of Black Sabbath's Self-Titled, if I'm not mistaken. So on Master of Reality, we have Tony Iommi on guitar, piano, and flute, Geezer Butler on bass, Bill Ward on drums and percussion, and unhinged motherfucker Ozzy Osbourne on vocals. Oh, my glasses are on the other side of the room. You'll see him in the B-roll. Geezer Butler also serves as principal lyricist, and this record was produced by Roger Ben. Oh God, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. This was Sabbath's last record produced by Roger. So, setting the scene for Master of Reality. 1970, we have War Pigs. Wait, no, Paranoid. I always get that wrong. Out of nowhere, Paranoid and its singles get big. Way bigger than anyone expected. Critics, OG fans, even Sabbath themselves. With this new mainstream attention comes a faction of very clearly not Sabbath listeners who pinned the band as, ooh, Satanists. Literally just because they dressed like this and referenced the occult on a few songs. Otherwise, they were writing about the Vietnam War and metaphysical shit, which, newsflash, every rock band was writing about in the 70s. And also weed. Can't forget the funny weed song. In response to all the Satanism nonsense, Geezer starts penning some songs that reference Christian themes. After Forever centers around themes of the Christian afterlife, and also hanging the Pope on a rope. Oh boy, we're off to a great start. Master of Reality production took place between February and April of 71 at Island Studios, and since the guys weren't touring while making a record, they actually had time to work on the record and improve upon the material that they already had. This may seem like a no-brainer, but you have to consider that Sabbath had all of a few days to slam together their self-titled record about a year before this, and Paranoid, see, I remembered it this time, they didn't have much more time than that. Now they had, actual time to work. Wow! So one of the most famous bits of Black Sabbath lore, besides, of course, Ozzy and the Bat, but that isn't really even Sabbath lore because that happens in the 80s. Never mind. Remember, boys, bats are friends, not food. One of the most famous bits of Sabbath lore is why Tony Iommi plays the guitar the way he does. When he was a teenager, Tony worked in a sheet metal factory, and he lost the tips of two of his fingers on his right hand in an accident with a machine. Hand injuries present a very unique set of challenges. Just ask my grandpa, who only lost a finger after he'd retired from his job at a saw blade manufacturer. And these challenges are even more unique for Tony, who's a guitar player. Yes, Tony's fretboard hand is his right hand. He's a left-handed player. In order to keep playing without causing extreme discomfort on his fretboard hand, Tony tuned down his guitar by 1.5 steps. This would be 3 semitones for those of you who care about that. With the idea being less tension on the strings equals less finger pain. Did this work? kind of. The unintended outcome was one of Black Sabbath's greatest assets. It's that the sound was huge. Geezer tunes his bass down to match Tony's guitar, and the rest is history. As for Ozzy, oh boy, he doesn't remember much at all from Master of Reality production. He was quite literally too high to remember the specifics. God bless you, Ozzy. The track listing of Master of Reality goes as follows. Opening up side 1, you have Sweet Leaf, followed by After Forever. Then a short interlude called Embryo, and side 1 is closed out with Children of the Grave. Side 2 opens with another interlude titled Orchid. Then you have Lord of This World, followed by Solitude, and the album is closed out by Into the Void. Making an important note here, my track listing reflects the original UK track listing. The original US track listing has a lot more subtitles and interludes worked in, but Warner Brothers deleted all of those to simplify things and make it more like the UK run. Master of Reality was first released in July of '71 on Vertigo Records, and my god, does it feel refreshing to cover an album on Vinyl Monday that was actually released on time. As so often happens with really trailblazing releases, this thing was slammed upon release. People just didn't get it. But in the long term, it sets up the blueprint for so many acts to follow. Lots of people cite this as the blueprint for heavy metal. Now, this is probably something you don't really see in my shelves because it's so small. Hey, here's the 33 1/3 on Master of Reality. It was written by John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats. Now, if you're willing to give an oddball record a try, I'm gonna go on a little bit of a tangent here to mention Goths by the Mountain Goats. It's a folk rock album heavily influenced by jazz, and the content is inspired by Black Sabbath and other heavy metal groups, as well as classic goth acts like Susie and the Banshees and Bauhaus. John listened to a lot of metal and a lot of goth music as a teen, and the album Goths is an homage to all of that. Again, it's an oddball, but if you want to see just how far-reaching the cultural impact of Master of Reality is, check out Goths. So this section of the video comes with the territory, with this being the first time I've covered Sabbath on my channel. This is one of the first times I've ever covered a record that wasn't blues-based rock, wasn't psych rock, or wasn't otherwise connected to the blues tradition. I think the only other times were my Neil Young and Joni Mitchell videos, and both of those are folk. I'm covering Black Sabbath because, yes, it is connected to psych. It's just not as obvious a connection as, say, Sgt. Pepper's or anything Pink Floyd did. Being the freak that I am, I have forayed into just how heavy the psych rock trend could get. You know, you start with early King Crimson, 13th Floor Elevators, and then you kind of get a little deeper and we get Gotta Ignore Evil Temptations by Iron Butterfly, Ultimate Spinach. Basically, if it sounds like an acid freakout, I'm predispositioned to like it. Also, gotta take the chance to shout out Crazy World of Arthur Brown in here. I have a feeling that Ozzy and the rest of the Sabbath guys listened to this record before going into the studio for their self-titled album. Just a theory. But psych was just that. It was a trend. It got incorporated into pop music so soon by the likes of Donovan and the Beatles that it was taken as far as it could go very, very quickly. It was a product of its time, and that's why it sounds dated today. And while liquid light shows and sitars and the whole mid-century medieval thing fell out of fashion pretty quickly, some elements of Psych would stick around. I think of the time signature fuckery that Psych adopted from jazz. It all goes back to jazz eventually. Use of synthesizers, all kinds of stuff that you hear Sabbath do. Not unlike the way Psych and blues came together with rock and roll to create the beginnings of punk music, Psych burned off and left the coals that would eventually become early metal. Turns out unprecedented acid-fueled ego death made Psych get pretty dark. If you're like me and you know that it's all connected, people, you hear a bridge between the more obscure Psych acts and early metal groups. A lot of music journalists have cited, either Zeppelin or Deep Purple as doing the hard rock stuff that would eventually become heavy metal. Others say that Helter Skelter by the Beatles is the first heavy metal song. I disagree with all of these ideas. I trace the foundations of what would become heavy metal back to a group called Power of Zeus. So Power of Zeus was a rock group from Detroit formed in 1968. They signed to Rare Earth Records and they didn't really make it that far out of Detroit. They were ultimately victim to an R&B label having no idea how to market a rock group. The Gospel According to Zeus, released in 1970, is their only album, and by the end of 1970, the group was effectively done. I do not have their record, as it's pretty hard to find in the wild. I honestly considered buying it on Discogs just for the express purpose of showing it in my Master of Reality episode, but I wasn't really feeling like causing the CCR episode 2 Electric Boogaloo debacle. I've learned my lesson. When you listen to what Power of Zeus was doing on that record, they were laying the groundwork for things that heavy metal would take to the moon. It's the remnants of psych rock with the seeds of what we'll see on Master of Reality. If you listen to I Lost My Love or Death Trip off Gospel According to Zeus, they're doing things that Deep Purple had only just started doing, Black Sabbath wouldn't be doing for another year, and things that Zeppelin wouldn't be doing for another 3 years. Hell, change the key of It Wouldn't Be Me, and it is a Sabbath song. The only thing Power of Zeus was missing was tuning down those guitars by a step and a half. I mean, hello, Rare Earth made Power of Zeus change their name from Gangrene to Power of Zeus to fit in with the psych crowd. I mean, Gangrene is a metal band name if I've ever heard it. And it's ironic once you consider Black Sabbath's name was originally Earth, which is a psych band name. It's all connected, people! If you ask me, Power of Zeus is the missing link between psych and heavy metal, if you can even suspend your belief for long enough to connect those genres together. So, to kind of rein all of this back in, while Black Sabbath was doing pretty new and bizarre things in the eyes of the mainstream, when you look at it from the greater sphere of underground rock in the 70s, where heavy psych was still pretty fresh in the memories of its listeners, Sabbath was pretty standard fare. TLDR, if you like Black Sabbath, seek out Power of Zeus. So, what do I think of Master of Reality? As I said at the beginning of this video, it is pretty far outside the realm of what I typically cover on Vinyl Monday. Though maybe from that last section of the video, you'll see how it all connects in my mind. Going in, I forget about this record. I totally forget about this record. This is the shortest record that I've ever covered on Vinyl Monday. It's just 34 minutes long. If I'm not wrong, this is the shortest Black Sabbath album. But I'll be honest, I found myself having to break up this album over so many separate listening sessions just to get through it. One of my favorite quotes from any of Lester Bangs' writing is from his Master of Reality review in Rolling Stone. He said, "Rock and roll has always been noise, and Black Sabbath have boiled that noise into its resinous essence. Did you expect Bones to be anything else but rigid?" Sabbath's sound on Master of Reality is sludgy as hell. It sounds like trying to walk through hot tar, or if we're staying with like a spooky Yuletide theme, it's like your spirit struggling to rise from your crypt through all of the padlocks and chains, A Christmas Carol style. That does mean that the pace of Master of Reality can drag at times. It's a little front-loaded with Sweet Leaf, After Forever, and Children of the Grave all on the A-side. But let's be real, this album couldn't have started with anything but the Sweet Leaf cough. Oh my god, imagine Let It Be by the Beatles starting with the Sweet Leaf cough. Just, I dig a pygmy! One of the things I take away from Master of Reality is those little moments where I hear the links between heavy psych and heavy metal. What do I mean by this? I'll start with Embryo. If you were to play that track on a sitar, it would read as an outtake from George Harrison's Wonderwall soundtrack. Can someone try that out for me? If by chance I have any subscribers who play the sitar, please try that out for me. Into the Void totally does a Got to Ignore Evil Temptations thing, and Solitude, with the way flute and piano are used, am I wrong to think it reads like early King Crimson? Call her Moonchild. Robert Fripp, don't sue me. If you know where to look, Master of Reality has the ashes of Psych littered all over it. If you know what to look for, trust me, you won't be able to unhear it. The only thing missing is a Planet Caravan tremolo effect. Does the After Forever synth make me laugh because it sounds a little bit like the one on Michael Jackson's Beat It? Yes. Is my sense of humor broken? Yes. Is After Forever my favorite track on this album? Also yes. It might have the most thought-provoking batch of lyrics to listen to, especially when you consider Sabbath's reputation in the 70s. It's all dark for the time, for the mainstream in 1971, but it feels like standard fare now. Orchid is so, I want to say pretty? Yeah, I think it's pretty. Classical guitar is very unexpected, but I dig it. It's a much needed change of pace. Even though Master of Reality isn't a long record, it sure can feel like one. I had to warm up to Solitude, but it's since become one of my favorite tracks. It's jarring between Lord of this World and Into the Void. At first, I didn't know what to think of it at that place in the track listing, but it's a great display of Tony's breadth of musical ability. The interludes are too. He was in charge of both of those. Tony Iommi is an underrated multi-instrumentalist. I really dig Ozzy's chill voice on Solitude too. At this point in Sabbath's history, we don't hear much of it, so the little points that we get it on Solitude, on Planet Caravan on the last album, it's welcome. I like it a lot. And I love when Geezer plays higher on his fretboard so we can actually hear what he's doing. He does it on Sweet Leaf and he does it on Lord of this World, and both times he does it are my favorite points of both of those songs. Master of Reality isn't my favorite Sabbath release. That would be Volume 4. Nothing will ever dethrone Under the Sun as my favorite Sabbath track. I also really like Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, and the post-Ozzy period of the band isn't as bad as people like to say it is. It's not great, don't get me wrong, but it's also not terrible. I might still favor Paranoid to this one. I'm not totally sure. But what I will say is that I had to brush up on all of my Sabbath listening for this video, and that was a joy to do. I needed to pack my patience to get through Master of Reality, but I will say it is a breath of fresh air from what I usually cover on this series. One of my favorite things about doing Vinyl Monday is making connections between music that I wouldn't normally be making, you know? Master of Reality is rife with opportunities to do so, and for that reason, I will be continually revisiting this record. My personal favorites are Sweet Leaf, After Forever, Children of the Grave, Solitude, and Into the Void, and my favorite of the interludes is Embryo. If you want to keep up with the Vinyl Monday faves, I have a Spotify playlist linked in my description of all of my favorite songs from every Vinyl Monday album I've ever done, including the albums that I covered before bringing the series to YouTube. And that is it! That is Master of Reality by Black Sabbath. I feel like there is so much more I could say about Black Sabbath, about this stage in heavy metal, but I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of Master of Reality? What do you think of Black Sabbath? Is this an early heavy metal record? Is this the first stoner rock record? Or is this the last Psych album, maybe? Whatever it is, leave a comment letting me know. I love hearing what you guys have to say about albums that I love, and I know you're gonna have a lot to say about this album. And if you like what I do here, you should like this video and subscribe to my channel. I post new episodes of Vinyl Monday every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!